The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry says a fair and transparent system should be adopted in identifying the vulnerable groups that are to benefit from Nigeria's free healthcare initiative under the recently signed National Health Insurance Authority Bill. Dr. Chinyere Almona, Director General of the LCCI, joins me for this discussion. Dr. Almona, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your viewers.
Thank you so much. Now, the LCCI does have a couple of things to say. You've said, put out the statement about the this healthcare bill, the vulnerable Nigerians, how they're going to be identified and classified, and also the tax coming from the telcos themselves. What are your thoughts on this? We know that this is going to impact the telecoms themselves, and we're expecting a 40% increase in the next couple of weeks on data, phone calls, etc., from the telcos. So how do you see them balancing all of this?
Thank you very much. And yes, I do have a lot of thoughts about this because it's something that worries or concerns the private sector. And it's important because when you apply a tax, you have to show that you're going to use the revenue from that tax to do something useful, and which is why we're advocating that if this is going to go forward, you need to think about implementation. Something that we fail to do in this country is sometimes we have these taxes, but we never really think, how do we implement it to be sustainable? How are we going to identify the vulnerable group? How are we sure that this fund isn't going to be plowed back to those who don't need it, for instance, for healthcare support? How do we ensure it gets down to the people that we plan for it to get to? That is something that needs to happen. And when you think about the importance or the import of this tax, think about the telecom operators and the fact that a lot of them have made a lot of investments in providing quality service to the subscribers. And if we are placing an additional tax on them, if they are able to pass it on to the users, then the users are bearing the costs. And you have a situation where those who, either their service delivery depends heavily on telecom infrastructure will have to have a heavier burden, cost burden. And you know already that right now with inflation and everything happening in the country, things are pretty difficult for the common man. And if this cost continues to rise, then it affects businesses and how they operate.
Now, in reading your statement, the LCCI did mention that for those companies you just mentioned whose services depend on telco infrastructure, you said they already pay about 36 taxes. If I saw that correctly.
Yeah, there's several taxes. I mean, you talk about income tax and all the other charges and, kind of costs that they are expected to pay when doing business. And that means that there's a heavier burden on them with all of these taxes.
So what does that leave them in thinking about the Nigerian business environment? Is that for them, is that a harsh operating environment where you have this number of taxes, and do you feel that they feel they're being targeted or singled out by the government for this, is it 1 kobo on every second of call that's been made? Why the telecoms industry?
Okay, for one thing we've always said in the in Lagos Chamber of Commerce is the fact that government needs to widen the tax web. Because as you increase taxes or you apply new taxes, you tend to tax the same group of people. So it becomes heavier and heavier. And yes, you're right, the business environment is pretty harsh. One of the things we said in that statement is also for government to think about creating a regulatory environment that supports or promotes businesses. Because if you have a regulatory environment that is not supportive of these businesses, then every decision you make is not to their advantage. It puts a heavy, burden on them, and they're struggling. They're struggling to make profits. COVID has happened, and a lot of businesses are already struggling. With the situation in the country, security, power, businesses are struggling. That's the reality. And so when you have these taxes, and if the telecom operators are able to pass on this cost to these same service users, then there's going to be a challenge for them.
When you talk about, sorry to butt in, regulatory body, I mean, I know that there is a Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, the ease of doing business, where private sector companies can go to for assistance or help, or just to make their life easy, as it were. Is that not having any impact on the business environment?
So the ease of doing business, fortunately, we've improved on the scale of the ease of doing business over the years since the presidential committee was set up. So that's a great thing, and that has reduced some burden from businesses. But with all that happened in the last 2 years, it's almost like it's reversing the benefits that we've had from the Ease of Doing Business Committee, because security isn't easier. If businesses have to provide their power, provide their water, bear the cost of security, bear the cost of transporting their goods and services, then it's a really difficult environment for them to do business.
So how are your members maneuvering this political cycle, where it would appear that the focus has shifted, more obviously to politics? How are they weathering the storm?
That's $1 million question. I'm not sure that's, I think everybody's complaining, so our members are constantly having that conversation on what can they do to ameliorate the effect of all of these pressures. Businesses will continue to struggle. I think businesses will continue to create strategies to try and manage the risk of the political changes happening, but it is difficult. It is very difficult.
Okay.